Yo, what's up, everyone? Today is Sunday, March 15th, 2026. I just realized it's been 23 years since the U.S. invasion of Iraq. And
Oh,
now we got,
it is the anniversary today, isn't it? Wow.
yeah, yeah,
Jordan year for that.
yeah. So, now on this episode of Real Sankara Hours, your favorite Pan-African socialist podcast, yeah, we're gonna mostly talk about the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. Um, today is Sunday, March 15th, 2026. Again, this is Real Sankara Hours, Pan-African socialist political podcast where we talk about news, current events, black culture, black radical theory from a Pan-African perspective. Um, and yeah, we have bonus episodes. Well, go to our website realsankarahours.org to basically find us, find where you can listen to us. We're on a variety of platforms. If you go to our Patreon, patreon.com/realsankara-hours, for $5 a month, you get access to bonus episodes. So things to like a heads up on what to expect for bonus episodes. Like one that before we started recording we were talking about is we want to talk about Liberia, this article on Black Zionism, and to flesh out further what Pan-Africanism is, and basically why like Pan-Africanism shouldn't be equated with Black Zionism. So that's something to expect for a bonus episode. And then also I think we also plan on watching Tears of the Sun and talk about that movie for a bonus episode. And also I also want to we discuss books as well, like books we've read. So one book called Africa and the Blues by Gerhard Kubik, I plan on discussing that, explaining that book in a series of bonus episodes. So anyway, that's something to expect for bonus content. $5 a month gets you access to bonus content. $3 a month, you're just a supporter of the podcast. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon for notifications. So the more subscribers, more listeners on YouTube, it boosts us up in the YouTube algorithm thingy. Because that's how like you get quote unquote content. It's the fucking algorithm and all this shit. So oh yeah, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Adam Hudson. Yeah.
This is Peter MGunn, and yeah, a lot's happened since we last recorded. It's I mean, when I first saw like sort of the build up happening, I was kind of like I had flashbacks to actually like this run up to the Ukraine war, in the sense that there's part of me that was like, okay, well, they always talk about this, but they're not going to actually do it, right? But then when sort of people I trust a little bit more, they're saying that like from the build up, like there's basically no way out, or you're not moving all these assets and all this shit into that area if that's not what you're intending to do. So, then February 28th, the one that I've been hearing about for almost my entire life, but certainly since the Iraq War started, as the real one, that America's been after, and we'll get into more sort of the factors behind this, but I just want to remind, especially every millennial, like the amount of anti-Iranian propaganda we grew up soaked in. And that leading up to, and the degree to which like so many of the Doctor Strangeloves in the previously named Department of Defense have been jonesing for this since 1979.
Yep.
But now we've got it, and no one feels good about it. So
Actually, just speaking of that, of pro-Iran war, anti-pro-Iran war, anti-Iran propaganda that millennials should remember. There was during the, I believe it was the 2008 presidential campaign, where John McCain, when he was running against former President Barack Hussein Obama, there is like leaked footage of him, basically changing the words of a Beach Boy song to bomb, 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 bomb Iran. I remember that. And that's something I was thinking about, right as the U.S. and Israel. By the way, this is something I want to emphasize. I don't think we should call this Israel's war, especially like with what Peter and I are talking about right now, the anti-Iran propaganda that's been around for a long time. This is not purely Israel's war. Obviously, Israel and Netanyahu want this war and have been itching for it, but do not pretend that the United States is some helpless victim and that like, oh my God, we're just being tricked by Israel to fight its own war. Like, no. The U.S. has always had an issue with Iran, particularly since 1979. And a little history lesson for people. This should be standard that everyone should know. But it's worth remembering that in 1953, the U.S. and British governments overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh of Iran, because he was like a social democrat, nationalistic type. He wanted to nationalize Iran's oil, and U.S.
oh no, yes,
U.S.
the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is now British Petroleum, was
Yeah.
what was operating there.
Yeah. So British and U.S. oil interests did not like that. So there was basically with the help, with large part by the CIA, they overthrew Mossadegh and installed the Shah of Iran, who was also very, very repressive. But the U.S. wasn't like complaining about the Shah's human rights record or the treatment of women. Like, no, like the Shah was pro-Western and played ball with the West, and so
That was our boy.
Mm-hmm. And then in 1979, there was the Iranian Revolution and the hostage crisis, where American diplomats were held hostage by Iran, and that is when the Shah was overthrown. And then you had previously it was Ayatollah Khomeini, and then he passed away in 1989, and then it became the Ayatollah Khamenei, and then
Which, admittedly, it is confusing because they are spelled very similar.
oh yeah,
But the degree to which, people in the media who are cheering this on or whatever, that they don't understand the difference is shockingly high. Like, that they don't understand that it's not Khomeini.
yeah,
But and Khamenei was not even really like because just out of morbid curiosity, I watched Jon Stewart, I think like last Monday, see what he said, and he was like making jokes, and he made one joke, and the audience was actually like, "Ah," like they weren't into it. And he's like, "What? He's a ruthless dictator who's dead, and you guys are coming." I was like, "Man,
oh fuck,
yeah," because Jon Stewart's been. I remember, like he helped make like this movie that was about some brave Iranian dissident journalist or something. I remember posting on Facebook. It's probably like 2009. Probably later than that. I can look up when the movie is, but I remember saying like, when the Iran war happens, Jon Stewart will have been one of its propagandists, and at the time people were like, ugh, you know,
Ooh.
what are you talking about? And I don't like to say that I feel vindicated, but it's just something I remember because,
Mm,
like I said, and I think a big part of my political awakening was like, peeling back like the reality of, the Iranian government, which, I think a few months or when the protests were going on last month, I said that like if they could, I wouldn't be against like an actual social revolution, but um, that's not. But I think even to that point, or not necessarily to that point, but what I want to say is that like the people intentionally misunderstand how the Iranian government functions, and it actually is a lot more complex and durable and dynamic. Or they found out now because
mm-hmm.
these idiots thought you could just drone strike an 86-year-old man and the whole country collapses. Like, I don't know why you think that. Like, um, any developed country, which Iran is like a pretty developed country. It's not, it's probably
Yeah.
a semi-periphery if you want to use like the Marxist classification. Any country like that, and especially one with, such a long history and sense of identity as Iran,
Mm-hmm.
is, yeah, does not just collapse with, one person who isn't really even like like it's not like calling him like a tyrannical dictator, Khamenei, is just very like not out. It's very outside of how that government actually functions. He's more like supreme leader is a bit of a mistranslation. It's more like spiritual leader. Um, and
Right.
he sort of weighs in on like how the government can be interpreted through Islamic doctrine. You know, Give like a big point of that was that Khamenei had a fatwa against nuclear weapons. He believed that
Yeah. Yep.
nuclear weapons were un-Islamic, and I always just felt like, well, if the guy who you say is the supreme dictator said that he doesn't believe in nuclear weapons, then like, what is all of this about, And I mean, I think it's just uh, like the propaganda fumes just like got put back into the air supply, and so people started huffing their own noxious fumes, and so they really believe, especially like the era of people in charge now. It's like they're so far removed from the Cold Warriors who at least understood game theory and would deal with, serious countries in a way that assumed rationality, which, on the other side, you can't do that when dealing with the US, but
Yeah. Especially right now. Yeah.
yeah. But like game theory has like predicted like they could have told you everything that would happen up until right now. But someone like Pete Hegseth is not sober enough to like comprehend game theory. So
And
this is where we are.
and also like let's like explain what game theory is. So basically, it's like, I mean, because I remember as someone who studied
Yeah, this
international,
is a
like,
big part of IR. It's like
yeah, yeah,
IR 101.
yeah. Actually, it is. Yeah, because I remember having to study that in one of my intro to IR classes. Basically, game theory. It's a it's a mathematical study of strategic decision making. So one one example is the prisoner's dilemma. So um, basically, I'll explain what the prisoner's dilemma is. Basically, like, okay, imagine you have two rational actors, right? They can either cooperate for their mutual benefit or betray them for their own individual gain. And basically, there's like different outcomes, right? Let's say you have two members of a gang that are arrested and imprisoned, and they're each in solitary confinement. They can't talk to each other, right? But the police, they don't have enough evidence to convict them. So they plan to basically, like with the evidence that the police have, they plan to just sentence them for a year on a lesser charge, but they don't have enough evidence to sentence them for the crime that they are arrested for a longer sentence. So basically, the police offer each prisoner like a bargain. They're like, basically, if you snitch on your partner, you'll go free while the partner gets 3 years in prison on the main charge. But if both prisoners testify against each other, they'll both be sentenced to 2 years. So basically, okay.
But also,
like imagine,
if neither of them snitched, then they would both walk.
Yeah, but the thing is, they both have to agree with each other to not snitch on each other. But the police are trying to offer them an incentive that, like, hey, basically offer a bargain that, like, it's more enticing to snitch on your partner while you go free. Basically, essentially, if you snitch on your partner, you go free while your partner gets 3 years in prison. But if you both testify against each other, you both get sentenced to 2 years in prison. So, and you're not given basically it's like a mathematical model. It's like game theory. So like, how many outcomes can you get? Like, who basically it's like, this is essentially game theory and stuff like the prisoner's dilemma. These are models of strategic decision making. Also, game theory gets used in like economics. I remember taking intro to econ, and game theory is used there. It's basically it's like the science of decision making among rational actors.
Yeah, and game theory in the prisoner's dilemma predicts that both prisoners would snitch because
right.
And that leads to a suboptimal outcome for both of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
I never took R far enough such that like that gets translated directly to geopolitics, but generally throughout the Cold War, it was basically the understanding of like, okay, if the US does this, then the Soviet Union would do this.
Yeah.
And then in response, the US would do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what would lead to, and in the worst form of it, you end up with nuclear war. And it's basically a way to avoid nuclear war. But I suppose Nixon came up with a different thing called the madman theory, which is in the 70s, which is basically like if you act all crazy, then this is against North Vietnam, but if you act all crazy, then the other side will just capitulate. But that didn't work either. So,
right.
I don't know why they would repeat madman theory. But people say that's what Trump likes to do that via Twitter. And that's sort of how that's sort of how it's understood how he acts, except for the fact that we also have, TACO, the Wall Street acronym, Trump always chickens out. So everyone always basically assumed that he would say a bunch of wild shit, like when he was dealing with North Korea. But then eventually, the interests of global capital intervene, and the foreign policy blob consensus ends up prevailing.
Right.
And not necessarily today, though.
Well, I mean, the thing with the madman theory today is that, like, it's not a theory, it's a reality. Like, we have a fucking madman running the country. So, yeah, and there was, and also the previous Ayatollah, and by the way, speaking of Ayatollah Khamenei, the U.S. killed him. U.S. fucking just snuffed them out. And obviously the Iranian government and a lot of the Iranian people in Iran, by the way, I want to specify that because the reaction of the Iranian diaspora is very different. But, you know, and, but yeah, like the Ayatollah Khamenei was killed by, you know, the United States. And so, Iran is not taking that lightly, which makes absolute fucking sense. But yeah, right now, like with Trump, we have an actual madman running the country versus trying to act like a madman. Trump is a fucking madman at the helm of the U.S. empire, and also he's surrounded by sycophants. So people like Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth,
Sycophants, but also psychopaths in their own right.
Yeah,
like
people
who are happy to mislead Trump into getting what they want.
Yeah, exactly. So like with Marco Rubio, he got what he wanted in Venezuela, and also the military strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean. By the way, shameless plug, but in one of my solo episodes I talked about the Trump's military strikes in the Caribbean, which were largely like some Marco Rubio wanted, but how that's the legacy of the War on Terror. Anyway, yeah, Rubio wanted basically the kidnapping of Maduro in Venezuela. That was definitely his thing. Stephen Miller is like the guy who wants the fucking ICE mass deportations. That's his shit. Now Iran, this is Pete Hegseth's moment for sure. And yeah, it's really important to emphasize that there are people within the U.S. foreign policy establishment who have been wanting this. Like I said, that's why I talk about John McCain when he made that joke about bombing Iran in 2008. I remember when I took my IR classes at Stanford. Gosh, looking back, that's almost 20 years ago. Because I graduated in 2010, and so like a lot of the classes I took were in like 2008, 2009, and now we're in 2026, so that's over 15 years ago, going on like
well, you would have been a freshman this fall.
Yeah, it could have been. Yeah, this is like 18 years ago. So yeah, with that timeline, yeah, that's the age of like a graduating senior this year who will become a freshman this fall. I remember when I was taking those classes, there was a lot of anti-Iran sentiment. Mainly, it was couched in these terms. This is how it was couched. Because during a time, so I know Peter, you graduated in 2011, so like we're similar years, but like we're there around the same time. So the time that Peter and I were at Stanford, this is still the Iraq War. So we're talking about the end of the Bush administration and the beginning of the Obama administration. So Obama became president during my junior year. Yeah, my junior year is when Obama was inaugurated. Yep, I actually do. Now I remember. Actually, do remember it. Yep. Yeah, I remember the Obama inauguration. That was, yeah, like because we went by quarters, so it was like, January of 2009. So yeah, it's definitely like the second half of my junior year. So my second half of my junior year and then my senior year, Obama was president. But from my freshman to early first half of junior year, Bush was still president. So during that time, public sentiment had turned against the Iraq War. But even the debates about the Iraq War, because during that time I was like an anti-war activist. Like I was heavily involved in anti-war activism and started a group, an anti-war group on campus. And also, in 2007, Donald Rumsfeld he was appointed to be a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, which is a right-wing neoconservative think tank on Stanford's campus. And so, like, I
It's
held
it,
work.
it's in the tower. It's not the tower's
Yeah,
not made of ivory, but if
yeah,
you're ever there, there's this giant windowless tower, and you're like, "What's that?" And it's where, like, well, previously, like the worst ghouls in the country were housed.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
now they seem, downright statesmanly, but
Compared
at
to
the,
Trump, yeah,
yeah. But yes, yeah, I mean, like at the time, like people still felt like Iran, like was in league with Al Qaeda.
yeah,
there's a big thing of I feel like especially when like new atheism was more popular, Iran caught a lot of smoke because it's a theocracy.
yeah.
Um,
And
which oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry, yeah, just to kind of like, yeah, to touch on that point and also flesh out further. A lot of the debates about like Iran were about. I remember taking a class and I was like taken aback by a comment by a guest lecturer. I think he was a former military, but he was talking about, and I'm saying, I'm kind of paraphrasing what he was saying in the lecture, because this is like the sentiment at the time, was that like Iran is interfering in Iraq and killing our troops. And it's like, America just fucking invaded a country on Iran's doorstep. Like, what the fuck do you expect? That like, because after, yeah, the U.S. invasion, which was, yeah, basically this time 23 years ago, the U.S. invaded Iraq on the lies of weapons of mass destruction. And by the way, like, the Bush administration tried its best to make the case for the Iraq war. The Trump administration, like, they're not even bothering trying to
I
like
know
come up with propaganda.
the
Like,
the point's been made in many other places, but it is just like, and it's fascinating, I think, to think about, especially like Gen Alpha growing up experiencing this, because seeing sort of the narrative play out on the nightly news and then, going online and sort of seeing more what the reality was definitely, I don't want to say radicalizing at 13, but it definitely, you know, disillusioned me of, a lot of the institutions in this country. And, if for people, for the kids like growing up now, seeing all this, and it's just like, there's not even really an explanation. It's just, we're
yep,
doing it because we want to, because
yeah,
we can.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's like, well, what do you think? It's like Gen Z is nihilist enough, but the kids after that, for whom, like, as they're coming into their understanding of the world with this going on, though, maybe I was talking to one of the bussers at my job last night, and I was just like, he's still in high school, and I was like, let's see what's going on with the war, and he was like, what war? And I was like, what do you mean, what war? So maybe they don't even know. But
Uh,
for the ones paying attention, it's gotta be pretty terrible.
yeah, and and actually, it's interesting you say that, because as a substitute teacher, I'm with this generation pretty consistently, and I will say, in terms of, so let me put it this way: this generation of K through 12, right? So the ones who are in high school, they are the last tail of Gen Z. The ones from middle school to elementary, that is Gen Alpha. So Gen Alpha, like, are still like little babies. So um they haven't reached like the age where, I mean, they're paying attention, I will say that, but I will say, I mean, I'll this is probably maybe more context specific in terms of California Bay Area. I will say I've noticed like younger kids, like, they're more cognizant of the ICE deportations, because they see it impacting their friends and their, you know, relatives of friends. Like I said, I'm speaking from the perspective of the San Francisco Bay Area in California, so that's something I see my students like. That's the issue that they're paying attention to more immediately, because they see the effect of it. when it comes to, like, let's say foreign policy, like maybe Palestine or now the war in Iran, um, look, I just think this in general for Americans, regardless of ethnicity or any background, for the most part, foreign policy is very abstract to Americans until Americans start to feel it directly. Um, the difference, especially with the Vietnam War, there is a draft. So, like, of course, people are going to have opinions on the Vietnam War because they see their friends getting drafted. I think,
Well, Trump said not to rule out a draft, so
yeah, I think that that'll start to change momentarily. But I do see more Americans starting to pay attention because Americans are feeling it with gas prices going up. Because what's also happening with this war in Iran is Iran has closed out the Strait of Hormuz. So actually, it might be worth. I'll just explain the significance of it because, like, I've noticed, like, some people kind of get it, but then I think for some people, you know, like
it's helpful. It's helpful if you have a map in front of you because
yeah,
it makes it a lot more obvious.
yeah, and so and I'll even, like, tie it to, like, what we were saying with the Iraq War, right? So, but anyway, I'll finish my thoughts on the Iraq War and then the Iraq War, then the Strait of Hormuz. But yeah, during the time I was at Stanford, like, there was already, like, public sentiment was against the Iraq War, but a lot of the discussion at Stanford in IR classes, we're still kind of conservative. Like, much of the debate was on, like, people weren't debating the rationale for the war because it was already obvious that there were no weapons of mass destruction. But there was, like, this kind of sunk cost debate because at the time the U.S. troops were still in Iraq, and so there were still, even among people who were critical of the war, like, when I would say we should withdraw the troops, they're like, I don't know about that. Like, we still need to be there because again, it's a sunk cost thing. Because, like, the U.S. had already toppled Saddam's government, and much of the state apparatus was pretty much decimated. And so there is this, there were insurgents attacking U.S. troops. There's a civil war going on Iraq. And this is where, like, again, the anti-Iran sentiment came in because a lot of people were blaming Iran for basically enabling the civil war in Iraq because the majority of Iraqis, I believe, are Shia, while Saddam, like, the Sunnis, I believe, were around, like, I think 20% of Iraq's population, and Saddam's government was Sunni, while the majority of Iraqis are Shia, and then Iran is also predominantly Shia. So the debate was people were pinning the blame on Iran for backing, like, Shia militias in Iraq. But they were doing that in a way to, like, absolve the U.S. of responsibility for invading the country in the fucking first place, which created the fucking civil war.
But
and then,
go
ahead.
Like, the U.S. very specifically promoted sectarianism
Exactly.
during the occupation to sort of prevent a united front of resistance from happening. So, it's classic projection. They're like, you were doing this thing.
Yep.
But the fact that Iran, needs to take action because it's right there, and it's like they're going to catch the fallout. So,
exactly.
Obviously, they're going to have to do something. That's just proof of how evil Iran is.
Yeah, exactly. That was the narrative as, like, why Iran was bad, because, again, a lot of it, I would say, was to just deflect primary responsibility from the U.S. for waging an illegal invasion in the fucking first place, which is, like, people like activists like myself at the time, we were trying to highlight that the real injustice here is that the U.S. illegally invaded Iraq, and as a result, it's led to a lot of civilian deaths in Iraq, from around, like, hundreds of thousands to, like, close to 1 million Iraqis being killed. And that's as a result of U.S. troops killing people, but also like the sectarian violence going on in the country. And again, the sectarian violence was a direct result of the U.S. invasion. And yes, the U.S. did promote sectarianism, but also like it was a result of the fact that not only it was a result of the invasion itself, because the U.S. toppled Saddam Hussein, and pretty much like the state apparatus was like there wasn't a functioning state in the country. So
No,
when you
L. Paul Bremer, who
yeah
is famously said, "We're going to be running Iraq as a colony." So
yeah, and so that was the result of the invasion, was the sectarian violence. And but again, rather than point the finger at the real source of it, which is the U.S. government for invading the country, which laid the groundwork for the sectarian violence in the first place, a lot of the debate and the critique of Iran was that, like, oh, Iran is like, basically, like, Iran is dastardly for, like, you know, interfering in Iraq. Like, well, why is the U.S. in Iraq? Like, what the fuck? So then it's all okay. This ties into, like, why the U.S. government, why the U.S. is in the Middle East in the first place. Like, what's the root cause of U.S. interference in the Middle East, from the invasion of Iraq to the U.S. overthrowing of Mossadegh in Iran in 1953, to the U.S. government's incessant support of Israel, and then these Gulf monarchies from Bahrain to Qatar to the United Arab Emirates. You know, like why those Gulf monarchies are like pro-U.S. and why there are so many U.S. bases in that region. That, by the way, have also been, those U.S. bases in that region have been struck by Iran. Like, why is that? Well, it's because of so much of the world's oil flows from that region, from the Persian Gulf area, where if you look at a map, the Persian Gulf, the countries that border it are Iran, a little bit of Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Dubai, and the United Arab Emirates. Oh, and Oman. Don't forget Oman. Well, actually, there's the Gulf of Oman. There's the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And as you look at a map, right, there's the Gulf of Oman and then the Persian Gulf. And those bodies of water, they meet at this area called the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm also looking at Google Maps. It's very straightforward, but like if you zoom out, right, Iran, like all of Iran's shoreline is basically like the Persian Gulf to the Strait of Hormuz to the Gulf of Oman. That is like the bodies of water that touch Iran, right? This is Iran's doorstep. Let me get some numbers, like Persian Gulf, like world oil supply, because I want to get like the exact percentage. Here we go. Yeah, 20% of the world's oil and liquid natural gas pass through the Persian Gulf, which is pretty significant. Then there's other oil reserves like in Russia, Venezuela, elsewhere, right? So it's not just the Middle East that has all the world's oil, but like a huge chunk of it, 20% of like the world's oil supply, goes through the Persian Gulf. And in retaliation for the killing of the Ayatollah and the U.S. and Israel bombing Iran, Iran is retaliating by cutting off the Strait of Hormuz. Because again, that's Iran's right there. And how is this leading to higher gas prices? Well, because so much of the world's oil, these oil tankers, basically are going from the Persian Gulf to get oil and then shipping them so they could be shipped to other countries, not just the U.S., but like, you know, China, elsewhere, right?
India is a big one.
India, oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, India's a big one because India is right there. India is very close to the Gulf. You go from the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman, and then past the Gulf of Oman, and once you pass Iran's shore, you get to Pakistan, and then next to Pakistan you get India right there, right? So India is very close. Um, so by cutting off the Strait of Hormuz, which if you the Strait of Hormuz, imagine it's like the door that basically is the door between the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, and then the Gulf of Oman goes into the Arabian Sea, and then that's where you get to the Indian Ocean. Okay, so once you get past the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf of Oman, you're basically in a bunch of just ocean, just Arabian Sea, then the Indian Ocean, then you can just ship anywhere, right? Once you get to the Arabian Sea, you can ship anywhere. You can ship to India, Ethiopia, down all throughout Western and Southern Africa, to Madagascar, to us, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, and then everywhere else throughout the world, right? Uh, the Strait of Hormuz is like a very crucial choke point for the flow of oil to everywhere else throughout the world. By Iran cutting that off and closing the Strait of Hormuz, that means it takes longer. I mean, it's almost like it's pretty much impossible for like oil tankers to pass through, right?
Yeah.
Iran's
Well,
make
the
yeah,
thing is that, and I still am not entirely clear, like, to what degree they've mined it, like they've dropped mines in there, or
right.
which degree they threaten to, but all they really have to do is threaten it.
Yep.
And the insurance that backs, these tankers are like, yeah, we're not covering that. And, the random sea captains, like, they don't love America and Israel enough that they're gonna, you know, be on a giant fireball waiting to happen when it's like, I mean, Iran has already attacked ships because they said like it's closed. Now they've also said that like Iran's oil is getting out, and like if you're trading not in dollars, because the thing about Iran, and like when I brought up game theory earlier, like this is the exact kind of thing that game theory would have predicted, and every foreign policy Iran expert would tell you that if you really threaten Iran, like this is what they're gonna do. But
Ex- yeah.
Trump and Trump didn't know that apparently. But Iran's basic strategy, is sort of asymmetrical economic warfare. Their goal, really, with all of this, is to hurt, the global economy and the American economy specifically enough such that the U.S. understands this isn't a thing they can do again. Because a big part, and I remember when Soleimani got assassinated 6 years ago, being like, what the, this is an act of war, right? Like, you can't just do something like this. And, Iran had a muted response, and the U.S. has done some other provocative stuff. And, it's getting to the danger of being like, this is, the status quo. And you know, I want to say this in the sense of like, it's really kind of an Israeli mindset where Israel likes to treat everything like Gaza, where like we do what we want, and then when you get mad, we, say, no, this is how it is now. And like they, keep escalating what it is. They keep pushing it further and further. And it's just, and, the other side just has to take it. And sort of my biggest fear in a sense was like, that the U.S. can get more and more brazen with the way it approaches Iran, and that Iran's just gonna take it. And I guess killing their supreme leader was, well, killing their supreme leader after ripping up the diplomatic deal that had already been signed, and then coaxing them into multiple rounds of negotiations, which were just covers to bomb them. At this point, it's like there's no person in the world who would be like, I can talk to these people. I can deal with these people. Like, it finally cohered, I guess, that, for their own survival and, for the survival of the country, really, as, the representative government, like, this is it. Now it's an existential threat. Iran perceives it. Um, and yeah, so their goal is to, the Strait of Hormuz is sort of the earliest thing. It's the most obvious thing, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know, one would have thought that like if we were serious, if look, there's a lot bad to be said about MacArthur, but if people like MacArthur and Patton were planning this, right, like the actual serious generals in American history, like you would have feel like you would have should have gotten a lot more aggressive and like why are they just now talking about Karg Island, right? Like you would have made sure that you'd achieve naval supremacy first, so that Iran couldn't do something like this, and you know, but no, they just thought decapitation strike, shots, and you know, watch the content numbers go up, I guess. But the second part of it is like, so Saudi Arabia has like a pipeline that goes, east to west, so they can reroute it into the Red Sea,
Right.
which is more complicated. But if this escalates, which the way a lot of people have been framing is that like basically Iran gets to control how it's escalating right now, because of just sort of their positionality in it. You go through the Red Sea and then the Houthis get involved. Now that shuts down the Red Sea.
Right.
And now, now we're in a serious, serious problem. And we're talking like $5, $6, gas prices. And we're getting into like rationing, like the 1974 oil crisis. Like that's what we're talking about there. And even now, like the economic damage that just even closing the strait for 2 weeks, because oil refineries and such are not things you can just turn on and off, right?
Yeah.
So that creates a crisis, with backup and all that stuff, and then also all the products that petroleum gets used for, especially fertilizer. What's at like we haven't even felt really the damage of what's just happened in the past two and
Yeah.
a half weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And to here's another analogy. This like I remember I was reading when I was one of the first books I read when I was in high school, "Oil, Power, and Empire" by Larry Everest, and that book um, it was like an eye opener. But like the way he described it, and the way I've long thought of it, is that basically the U.S.'s interest in the Middle East, particularly the Persian Gulf region, this like Saudi Gulf Middle East region, is it's not just about controlling immediate access to the oil. Uh, it's about controlling the spigot. Basically, the U.S. empire, its hand is on the spigot of oil in the Middle East. This is why the U.S. has a strong relationship with Israel, why it has a strong relationship with Saudi Arabia, and why it backs these Gulf monarchies, which are basically like they just use those countries as U.S. military bases. They dress it up as, oh, we're gonna protect you. Like the U.S. tells these Gulf monarchies, like, oh, we're gonna protect you from Iran. But look how that's turned out.
Yeah, how's that working out for you?
Yeah,
Really, and I hate to I'm not going to paraphrase Kissinger because Kissinger has said something like this, but basically, the only thing worse than being an enemy of America is being its friend, because when the shit goes down, it's like, whoops, sorry. I mean, it's the same thing with the Kurds, where it's like, after the U.S. sold out the Kurds in Syria, now they want to try and get them to start an insurgency in Iran, and it's like, well, why would they go for that?
yeah,
Like, you saw it, because that's another thing. Maybe just touch real briefly. Part of the strategy is like, Iran is also ethnically diverse, like many large countries. Not everyone is Persian, and there's Kurds in the north and there's Balokis in the east, and they have various separatist movements that raise their head, and the classic imperial playbook is like, yeah, arm these separatists, but it's not like first, it easier said than done. First of all, second of all, like I said, after after the U.S. sold out the Kurds in Syria, why would they trust the U.S. again? And then third, like with the blokies on the east, like that's not also just Iran. Like Pakistan also is dealing with that, and it's like, well, Pakistan will, if you try that one, then Pakistan's going to get involved. And now we just get into an even bigger conflict, and we may yet right now be asking the question like, are we already in World War III? Because I'm not sure if I saw it on Press TV, because I do check the Iranian state media just to see what it says.
Ooh.
I know.
Ooh, you're supposed to watch Western state media. Gosh.
Because, well, like, I mean, at the very least, why would you not want to see what they say? Because,
right, yeah. I mean,
I don't know. It's actually not as, I feel like Press TV used to be a lot wilder, and it's like matured a lot. Back in like 2013 or something, it would have so much wilder shit on there.
they would, yeah. Yeah. I sorry to cut, just to add, but like to your point, I don't want to like disrupt your train of thought, but like yeah. I'll just round up the point about the spigot, but I wanted to touch on your point about like media sources, because I watch like there's one YouTuber I like. His name is Glenn Deason. I believe he's a Norwegian conservative political scientist, but he has a lot of like these really good political scientists experts on. And what when I was just realizing this, like I was thinking this guy apparently, Glenn Deason is I guess considered he's a Norwegian political scientist, and he's he is a, let's see, is he a professor politics? I think apparently his politics are, he's of the neo-realist school, but he's a little more politically conservative. But I was thinking like, oh, okay, so conservative in Norway must mean like you're just a social democrat or some shit. He's pretty critical of NATO, but I also listen to media sources that like have some good expertise, but not, they're like, you're supposed to watch MS Now and all the like the mainstream liberal networks, but with the spigot part, like all this like this military American militarism in the Middle East, that is basically essentially America's hand on the spigot of the flow of oil. That is why the U.S. is in the Middle East, is to basically control the steady flow of oil, which is a huge bedrock of the global economy. It's
supposed to keep prices stable, but
exactly. And also, I'll return to you, but like I want to mention this point. Petrodollars. Basically this agreement between the U.S. and the OPEC nations, which is to sell oil in U.S. dollars. That's the arrangement, particularly since the 70s.
Yeah, so, this is all sort of what they hashed out after the oil crisis in 74, which,
yeah,
it seems so, I always find it fascinating that there was a time where Saudi Arabia was willing to, cut off the global oil supply in defiance of Israel. That is why the 1974 oil shock happened, that your boomer parents still remember, and that was because of the Yom Kippur War.
Yeah,
and being against Israel, because at that time, even in the Saudi royal family, there was still sort of a third worldist, liberationist sort of strain in it, and we're so far away from that. But yes, I want to say, I might have seen it on Press TV, but I might have not. I'm sorry. I'm not the most meticulous at documenting where I see things, but they said that Iran was basically like, if Ukraine wants to interfere with this, like Ukraine can get this smoke too. And I was like, I mean,
oof.
that would definitely uh probably put us officially in World War III category. But the thing is, it's just like, what is, Zelensky is meeting with the Shah, so like, or the Shah, the son of the deposed Shah, is like the person that some people in the Iranian diaspora are like, yeah, put him in, that's gonna go great. But the point is that there's all these, extraneous actors and such who don't have any incentive to de-escalate, and there's no, yeah, basically these things spin out of control faster than anyone can predict or really understand what's happened until it's too late. And I like I'm not gonna cheerlead it. Um, but there is some, compared to the way I felt during, the high points of the Gaza genocide, which of course is not over, but I felt like, like my entire, life force almost like was being drained from me, in the sense of like it just made it impossible. Like I felt like I was just, dazed, going about my life like I was in a video game or something. And, I think that's partly because like the outcome is basically predetermined, and what we call wars generally, since I've been alive, are not really wars but commercials for defense contractors. um and the thing about an actual war is that the outcome is not certain, and geopolitical orders are made and unmade as a result of them. And
Yeah.
what Iran understands, because they've been forced to understand, is that there's going to have to be they have no incentive or need to, stop anything that they're doing right now. They can produce ballistic missiles and drones much faster and for much cheaper than the US can produce interceptors, which are much more expensive and much more costly.
Yeah.
And harder to make and harder to ship over there. So what Iran needs, I mean, it's been phrased in terms of deterrence, which I guess, that's like foreign policy speak, but basically, like, there's gonna have to be a total reordering of, the global, or at least the regional security arrangement, before, any of this is gonna be settled, because this is not a thing where, you know, you can, it's almost like therapy speak or something. The way that it's like, or oh no, that's what it is. The way IR people will talk about it, it's like, we're doing this to get them back to the table. Well, you fucking turned over the table,
Yeah.
set fire to it, and threw it off the building. There's no table.
Right.
There's no
Yeah.
table
There's
anymore, which is
no.
what you decided to do. So there's
Yeah.
no bringing them back to anything. You said, Trump, Petey, you said unconditional surrender. And you know what that means, because,
Basically, they want Iran to bend over and take it in the ass.
I mean, they want, and I'll get into a further Roman analogy, but, in ancient Rome, which I know Trump doesn't care about, but I know Petey does, because all racist fascists are obsessed with ancient Rome. They would, when they won, they would take the leader and they'd bring him back to Rome. They'd parade him in a triumph. And that's what
Yeah.
they want. They want to
Yeah.
take they want to take the IRGC and put them in chains and parade them down Washington D.C. That's what they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
They want something like that. Unconditional surrender. To, make to completely destroy the country. And I was hesitant at first, and I still am, because U.S. certainly has the firepower to. I mean, in the Korean War, the United States bombed basically every building in the North. Like, they actually stopped because they ran out of targets, because they destroyed literally everything. And, part of me is like, well, why haven't they just done that yet? I guess maybe that takes a little bit of time, but, it's not like a properly motivated United States could, completely defeat Iran, but uh, that would require, a level of understanding that like these people just don't have, the people running the show. Because like the fact that the generals are like doing all these leaks to be like, look, we told them this is what is going to happen if you do this, just so that it's not our ass. I mean,
yeah, because the people who are like I'm just kind of going through some links to put in the show notes. The people who are like the competent runners of empire, right? Like they plan this shit out because they're concerned about long-term stability for the U.S. empire and the global economy. That is what they care about. And like I said, to go back to my earlier point, the reason why for the U.S. military presence in the Middle East is that is the U.S.'s hand on the spigot for the flow of oil from the Middle East. That is why the military is there. It's not there to protect our allies or whatever. It's just basically just in case, like, hey, if there's any kind of entity or government that fucks with the flow of oil, the U.S. can quickly deploy troops to, show them what time it is. Basically, that is a point for all those U.S. military bases and all those different U.S. military assets in the Middle East. That is why they're there. They are there to protect the flow of oil. It's not about fucking democracy. It's not about protecting our allies. It's not about like any of this lofty shit that the U.S. likes to say about why we're there. No, it is there, and what should be abundantly fucking clear to anyone who has like some like 1/8 of a brain who can process what the fuck is going on, is the reason why the U.S. military is there is to protect the flow of oil for the global economy. That's it. That is why the U.S. military is there, and that is why like there are. I mean, we haven't even gotten to like the deaths, right? Like the deaths in Iran are climbing up, but the U.S. is being very quiet and hush hush about the damage to American personnel in the Gulf region, because they're only leaking like a few names, and like we only have, I think, maybe that the Trump administration is willing to at least leak publicly like 6 Americans or something like that, or like somewhere like less than a dozen Americans being killed. But I am pretty sure with the amount of Americans in the Middle East, in that region, not just soldiers, but like diplomats, spies as well. Like there's some like CIA and, intelligence assets in the Middle East. Again, that's why they're fucking there, is to protect the flow of oil for not just the U.S., but the global economy, and also to protect the status of the petrodollar. That's what props up the U.S. as the world's reserve currency, is the petrodollar. The fact that oil, which is so important for the global economy, not just for gas at the pump, right? It's also important for energy, right? Oil and natural gas is important for energy, like especially for heating when it gets fucking cold. It's used for plastics, fertilizer. The whole world economy relies on a steady flow of oil. Let's make an analogy, right? I like thinking of this analogy. During the transatlantic slave trade, the global economy during that time, and why the Western Europe and the United States relied so much on slave labor, were cotton and sugar. During that time, the international economy relied heavily on cotton, produced fucking cheaply, and sugar, because Europeans had an appetite for sugar, and sugar was being used in a lot of stuff, right? Even today, the transatlantic slave trade's legacy of the proliferation of sugar, you look at all this shit that we eat, right? You look at the ingredients, there's a bunch of sugar or sugar-based products, right? The use of slave labor that you don't pay, labor that's free, that made it so that people could consume sugar and also cotton used for clothes, buy them at a cheaper price, right? So that's why slavery lasted for so fucking long, because the international economy relied on cheaply produced sugar, and cotton. Now, in the 20th to 21st century, particularly since the advent of the internal combustion engine, the global economy has relied on the steady flow of oil. Not even just for oil, not even just for cars. Think of how much air travel that the global economy relies on. That's all oil right there.
Oh,
The fucking
I do not want to think about it because I have to book plane tickets soon, and now
Yeah.
like, if I wait even 3 weeks, are they gonna be 3 times as expensive?
Exactly. Yeah. So think of how much international air travel. Like people take that for granted. Like jet fuel. That's all fucking oil. Like, and it's a lot of it. Jets burn a lot of fucking oil. A lot of it. So air travel and cars. That's a huge chunk of oil and carbon emissions. So so having some price stability for that helps the economy because of how much we rely on cars for transportation, oil for international travel, plastics, etc. That is why there's a U.S. military presence there, and also again it props up the stability of the U.S. dollar because there's this agreement that okay, when people buy oil, it's being purchased in U.S. dollars. That's why, U.S. Treasury bonds would get bought up by different countries, is so that they have U.S. dollars to purchase oil, right? That right there is what props up the U.S. empire. The petrodollar and the 800 plus military fucking bases the U.S. has around the world. That is the U.S. empire right there. Right now, what we are seeing is basically a threat to America's empire. What props it up? The U.S. military installations in the Middle East that Iran's just bombing with cheaply made drones versus these expensive missiles that the U.S. has, these missile interceptors. By the way, the U.S. and Israel, their stockpile are depleting because those missiles are fucking expensive to produce, right? And you have to launch a couple of them for them to be accurate to hit missiles in the air, right? And plus, they rely on satellite and advanced radar technology. Iran's also striking that too. It's not just the U.S. military bases, but also the comms technology, radars. Iran's bombing that with fucking cheaply made drones, and Iran has their own spies too. So they've been watching, because this is all on Iran's doorstep. So it would make sense that they would have spies in the area to be okay, Israel fucking hates us. America is has all this fucking military infrastructure. The U.S. just invaded and toppled a country right next to Iran, Iraq. So obviously Iran is gonna be all right, we're gonna be a little on guard. What the fuck? What, are they up? Are we next? Are we fucking next? So from the Iranian perspective, of course they're gonna have try to spy on the U.S. and Israel. That's how they were able to figure out where the hell to strike with their cheaply made drones. Which parts of U.S. military bases and assets for them to strike. They have spies, because that on there in is self-defense. Because again, John McCain in 2008 was saying bomb Iran. Israel and Netanyahu have been threatening to bomb Iran. The U.S. under Trump took out one of their top generals, Soleimani. There is a 12-day war to basically bomb Iran, the nuclear facilities, which is kind of weird. Okay, because the Trump administration was saying, well, we're bombing Iran again to get rid of their nuclear facilities. Wait, I thought you said you already bombed all of their nuclear facilities. Well, we're going to bomb it again because we have to bomb more nuclear facilities. They keep changing the fucking narrative, which I don't think they even care about the narrative. They just want to do it because it's just all Pete Hegseth just wants to whip his dick out and be yeah, man, just want to fucking just bomb Iran. And also I think the U.S. got very overly confident and arrogant after the kidnapping of Maduro in Venezuela.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think they felt if we can do this in Venezuela, we can do this in Iran and get away with it. So I think that's another reason why. I also think, we haven't talked a lot about Epstein, but I do think this is a fucking distraction from the Epstein files because Trump is all up in that shit. he has all been not just like being buddy buddy with Epstein, but like, I mean, actual like fuck, like pedophilia, like just doing all kinds of like weird sexually abusive shit to young girls. Like, I mean, it's so obvious that
Yeah.
Trump's a fucking pedophile, and I think that's another fucking reason for the timing of this as to why Trump wants to do it. It's not just because Israel, like, he wants to distract from the fucking Epstein files. I think that's another huge part of it. And they thought that I mean that Trump has overshot his hand. I think Trump and Hegseth thought that this would be easy, that they can just knock off the Ayatollah and that they can just do whatever the fuck they want. They drastically underestimated Iran's response. Because
Well,
Iran, yeah,
because they had basically had sort of, decentral victory for the anarchists here in horizontalism, I guess, because they had basically they had sort of had a decentralized plan of like if this happens, because
right,
I mean they understood, the degree to which Israeli intelligence has penetrated. Also, like I don't know, man, like it's an 86-year-old man. He's not going to be hiding in a bunker his whole life, so it's not like he's hard to find necessarily,
right,
and you know uh, basically they had like a set of things that already been delegated such that if this happens, then everyone's empowered to do this, this, and this as a response.
right.
While they figure out, and getting the guy's son, the new Khamenei, Mujtaba, I think is his name.
Yeah, Mojtaba Khamenei, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's also you know, basically saying like this, nothing has changed. Like we're not, like the whole thing. Like how, I mean, we know how divorced. Maybe we don't truly know how divorced from reality Trump is, but the fact that he's just like, yeah, I mean, I'd like to have a say, Iran. I mean, put me in, loop me into the group chat. Like, I'd like a say. Why not? It's me. It's me. It's very rude that you won't let me in. I care too. Like, why aren't I in the assembly of experts, which is what the body that elects the supreme leader is called. That because the supreme leader is in fact elected. Um, yeah, the whole thing about like I clocked it as soon as the Maduro raid happened because I was like, this is like me when I put my laundry away as soon as it's washed. It's like I did one thing. I'm gonna be unstoppable for the next week. It's like you guys did one thing. You like the American military hasn't been able to do anything basically. Since Vietnam, but they or well, since the Persian Gulf, let's say, since '91, they did one thing and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, America's back. Uh, even Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, lost to Italy, and they fucked up because they thought that they had already like clinched to the next round. It turned out they hadn't, and so then they had to like get bailed out to even make it to the next round. Just as a metaphor, since that's going on right now. But the point is that like it's I didn't necessarily think a whole lot of like American leadership growing up, but the degree to which everything has fallen, the degree to which everything has been enshittified. Like I've heard people say it really feels like they just put, what happens if I invade Iran into Chat GPT, and this is, and they just did what Chat GPT said. But that's not even necessarily like a metaphor, because it's like, yeah, they're using, AI, Palantir, Open AI, like they're using AI to, almost run the war for them. So it's like these people don't even know how to run a war basically anymore. Which and on that note, I didn't want to talk about the girls' school. This is a good time to bring that up. Um,
Oh
basic
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
because first, and I was like, okay, right, yes, this thing has started. When I woke up Saturday morning, you know, having to go to work in 4 hours, um, and it's like, oh, it started, and it's like immediately we bombed a girls' school,
Yeah,
which you know didn't shock me in the slightest. But now it's sort of come out that it's like, oh, we used like old, the U.S. was using old maps and
Right. Yeah.
like AI targeting, and so the point is it was an accident. We didn't mean to, and it's like things on Google Maps.
Right.
And while I would say I wouldn't put it past like parts of the military industrial complex to be that decrepit, it's also like the CIA created Google Maps.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how we wouldn't know that. But also just like of course we would do something. Like the idea that America doesn't do stuff like that, I don't know why people, because even like far left people are still basically saying that, running with the idea that, it was a mistake, and not like to set the tone, Israeli style, not saying Israel did it, but I'm saying that like Israel's kind of rubbing off a little bit, not that we've bombed plenty of schools and hospitals before, um, but just like the idea of putting it out there in front. I mean, what did PD say? He said, we're an end to woke wars. And I'm like, why? What about the Iraq war was woke? But then I remembered, oh, because the US at least tried to put in a functioning government or something like that, they're at least like a little bit of lip service to promoting democracy, and now it's like none of that, So of course, a politically incorrect war is going to open with a girls' school being blown up.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, I'm not buying that it was an accident because, well, I mean, if you compare, let's say, World War II with a lot of bombs dropping from those big planes like the B-52s and other kinds of bombers, um, like when they were dropping bombs, they couldn't really see what they were hitting because they had navigation, but it was this is analog World War II, right? It's in the 40s, so there were no computers,
Yeah, they were
satellite.
using slide rules.
Yeah, they were using maps, slide rules, and radio, and so they couldn't exactly see where they were hitting. So there were civilians killed by American troops during World War II, but you could actually say that was collateral damage because they could not see where they were hitting from thousands of feet in the air. Um, Now, look, I mean, we have like computers, satellites, radar, and also the cameras for U.S. weapons have gotten a lot better. So like we're at like fucking 4K, 1080p. I don't know what the exact camera resolution is on a lot of U.S. military cameras when they're bombing shit, but their camera quality has gotten better. So, and like, yeah, like what you're saying, Peter, like the school is on Google Maps. So the idea that they didn't know it was, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it just because that kind of technology has just gotten better. So I'm not buying that it was some sort of accident. And um yeah, actually, Peter, what you were saying about like the U.S. left, before I continue, I mean, it is just as a as a teacher, um, I always feel some kind of way, like when children are killed, because it's like I work with children, so it's like when I see faces of kids just being killed in a war, I'm just like, oh god, it's on a human level, it's like heart wrenching, but a lot, I'm also like I'm just not surprised anymore, especially I've been reflecting on just like my entire adult life of speaking out against the U.S. empire from like when I organized anti-war protests at Stanford, starting in 2007, so getting close to 20 years, and then like writing about the war on terror in the 2010s. I'm at the point now where like the depravity and brutality of the U.S. empire overseas, like a lot of that stuff just doesn't surprise me anymore. Just having you know, like paying attention to that issue for so long and like pretty much my entire adult life, but still doesn't, take away from the tragedy of it. But actually, Peter, what you were saying about like the U.S. left's response to the girls' school strike, it reminded me about the state of the anti-war movement in the U.S., or really the lack thereof. And I find it like, I mean, because there's all this like, I guess you could say like burgeoning left energy, like particularly since Bernie and the DSA and Mamdani, and there is a pro-Palestine protest. But when it comes to of movements focused specifically on the U.S. empire, I really think that the U.S. left has fallen short on that front. I really do. I really think the U.S. left has fallen incredibly short on having a principled anti-war movement and principled organized anti-war platform and flank. I think the U.S. left has fallen incredibly short on that. I think it's kind of ticked up since Israel's genocide in Gaza, but that's like my issue with how it gets turned is like the people who got radicalized by Gaza, a lot of them are trying to say this is Israel's war, which again I push back on that narrative. I do think Netanyahu had a hand in pressuring Trump to do this, and I do think that Netanyahu saw Trump as more amenable to go along with bombing Iran versus other leaders. But I do want to emphasize, and I think this is something we're hammering home here on this episode, is that this is something that the U.S. has wanted for a while. And the U.S. has always seen Iran as a threat. But, there's always been like planners within the U.S. foreign policy blob the people who do game theory and all that shit. Like, they've always been like a little cautious about the cost of striking Iran. They've always seen Iran as an enemy, but the cost of going to war with Iran, like they've always they've been reticent to do that because just, they've never wanted to do it recklessly. There we go. That's what I want. I think that's the best way to see this, is that the people within the foreign policy establishment in the U.S., I don't think they have anything wrong in principle with going to war against Iran, but I think their issue is the means by which it's done. So I think they don't like that Trump is doing it so recklessly, but I do think like a lot of them see no problem with regime change in Iran, at least on that end. I don't think they see. Again, this is why I don't think that this should be called Israel's war, because I do think that the U.S. foreign policy establishment, in principle, they are not opposed to regime change in Iran, but I do think that they don't. The way that Trump is doing it is so reckless, and because he's a fucking madman, it is, it's leading to disaster, especially for fucking oil prices. So, but I think that my thoughts on like the anti-war movement, and I think here's what I think. I think there's two reasons why the anti-war movement has declined in the U.S. I'll start with one. One thing I noticed is that during the Obama years, the left was kind of divided on Syria because, and I've never been like pro Assad, and like I don't have no affinity for him, but I do think the new leader of Syria, he's nothing.
Literally Al Qaeda.
He's literally Al Qaeda and letting Israel do whatever they want. So, but I've always been like kind of, when it comes to Syria, I've always had like kind of mixed feelings on it. But I've never been in favor of more over U.S. intervention. I've never been a fan of like U.S. intervention in Syria. That doesn't mean like I have any affinity for Assad, but I saw it. Like I saw like people within the left be very divided on that issue, And I think by the left, like not having, again, sticking with like a principled anti-war message even on Syria, while also still acknowledging like, hey, like, yeah, there are people who are rising up against Assad, and they have their reasons for doing so. And I mean, look, even Assad himself, he did cooperate with the U.S. during the war on terror when it came to the Black Site program. So like, um, that needs to be mentioned, that the Assad government did cooperate with the U.S. when it came to the CIA Black Site program, because Assad tortured people, and so like when it came to specifically like extraordinary rendition, where the U.S. would send people to governments where they know they would be tortured, like the Assad cooperated with the U.S. government on that. So did Gaddafi as well. So anyway, I think I've noticed that, and I do think that actually, let me read something that Caitlin Johnstone posted on Instagram. She said, this is what? I think it's something that she said on maybe Twitter and then post on Instagram. Anyway, she said, I think I'll read part of it, but she said the left's resistance to the Iran war has been relatively muted and inadequate up to this point, which I wholly agree with. One reason for this is because a lot of pro-regime change voices inserted themselves into the pro-Palestine movement and have been promoting their view for 3 years. Totally agree. I used to follow a few pro-Palestine accounts on TikTok and Instagram who sound great when they're talking about Gaza, but suddenly transform into Lindsey Graham whenever they're talking about Iran. I'm exaggerating slightly. They dressed up in leftist-sounding language, etc., but functionally their position hasn't been much different from that of Marco Rubio. I don't have time to get into a big flame war with minor internet personalities, so I'm not going to call anyone out or cite specific examples, but the long and short of it is they wanted regime change and promoted the idea that we should all, quote, center Iranian voices, i.e. the voices of warmongering Iranian diaspora. That's been happening throughout the pro-Palestine movement, both online and off, and has put a wobble on people's confidence when it comes to resisting Trump's latest mass atrocity. And then she said, the idea that we need to defer to Iranian diaspora about the morality of this war is batshit insane and does not deserve to be taken seriously. Okay, and Caitlin Johnstone's a white woman, so like, she's saying this like, ruffling some feathers with this one. Too many leftists have let warmongers of Iranian descent bully them into silence on this front in exactly the same way that they let Western Jews bully them into silence about Palestine for decades. Their wholesome leftist sensibilities get exploited by cynical manipulators because they want to be receptive to what they perceive as a marginalized group, and it leads them to espouse the exact same foreign policy positions as the CIA and the U.S. State Department. And she's basically saying this needs to stop. So I want to mention that because, like the Iranian diaspora, like let's just say they don't exactly speak for all of the people in Iran, and even the people in Iran have a variety of views about the Ayatollah and the supreme leader. Like, not there are many people in Iran who have their issues with the government. But, then there are people who are don't have issues with it. That's for the Iranian people to decide, in my opinion. If you're in the U.S., it's like, okay, you know what? Let them deal with that on their terms. That's what I think. If you live in the U.S., your primary responsibility should be to rein in the U.S. empire. That is it. The people of Iran, let them hash things out on their terms. But the Iranian diaspora, though, their views, they are much more pro-Western.
Yeah,
than Iranians in Iran.
Because it's and I know some Iranians, Some of my best friends are. Just kidding. But I've known Iranian people throughout my life, and
S-
when I talked about
Same here.
talk
Yeah.
to them about it, like they're not fans of the government, but they're still very proud of their country.
Right.
And
Exact. Yeah. There you go.
and so, they don't want to see their country get bombed and invaded. And that is sort of like the default, like regular stance of like an Iranian in the United States. The ones that go further, the ones that wave the Shah flag and are cheering on Israel, those people are unhinged. And unfortunately, they occupy a lot of the oxygen within that community. Kind of,
Yeah. Yep.
and yes, she brought that you reading that, it did make me think of all the varying quote unquote Iranian leftists on social media I've encountered over the years that, yes, talk like leftists, but are pro regime change and, don't really when you say like how would that come about, they don't really have a lot of answers. Um yeah, I mean the thing is, and I feel like we talked about this with centering Venezuelan voices in the Maduro thing, is that it's like, yeah, that's kind of like the soft folk. That's like the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, which is sort of like the soft focus regime change arm of the CIA. They're like the one. They're
Yeah.
more like in universities, and they uh, approach things from a liberal perspective. I just find it quaint almost that like these people are still around and thinking they matter in this administration. Like, what are you doing, man? How do you not understand what's going on? Like that, like center Iran. Okay, fine, whatever. But like they don't care about that. They don't care. You know, the Department of War does not care about the Iranian diaspora. They don't care
Yeah.
about anything that's happening. He's in a, that he's in his bag. He wants to, he thinks he's a Roman general, and but I'll close talking about what happened when Rome tried to invade Persia, but we don't have to get there yet. But
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't care about the Iranian left. They don't care about women's rights. They don't
Nope.
care about the mini skirts that Iranian women used to run around in the early 70s. They don't care about that. They don't care about it. They want blood. I realized it's kind of like these people have had war boners for this thing for
Yep.
40 goddamn years, and it
Yep.
is kind of like
Mhm.
I won't say Scarlett Johansson because she's a Zionist, but pick, and this is male centered, but whatever, celebrity you've had a crush on, they appear in front of you naked and they say, "Take me now." Like, and you're finally there. Like, and all of a sudden you're like, I feel weird about this. I don't, you can't perform, and I feel like maybe that's it, is performance anxiety or something, because like, yes, the blob, foggy bottom, whatever you want to call it, the cell core, they have been horny for this thing
Yep.
since
Yeah.
1979,
Yeah. They have.
and now that they've got it, they don't even want it.
Well, to that point, and then I'll get to the other reason why that we don't have an anti-war movement. Like Trump is in over it. Trump is really in over his head, and I think like behind closed doors, it seems like he's looking for an off ramp. I was just reading. Okay, this is a New York Times article. Because this talked about like well, the title of it is why Iran is blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and also the way that Iran has blocked the Strait of Hormuz is by attacking ships, and so the New York Times gives like this map of like the different ships that Iran has attacked. So I'm gonna read a couple paragraphs from it, a couple part of it, and then there's something I was watching on Glenn Deason that ties into this. So the article says, the United States vowed to thwart Iran's attempts to block the Strait of Hormuz on Friday as the Trump administration worked to ease an energy crisis stemming from the Middle East war. By the way, just recently, Trump attacked Karg Island. Actually, the way people pronounce it in English press is Karg, like like a G at the end, but um, in Persian it may be different. But I do know, as someone who studied Arabic, I'm looking at Google Maps, and oh, you know what? That letter I'm looking, because I don't speak Arabic fluently, but I understand the script, so I'm looking at it. Yeah. There we go. It could be pronounced in English. I think it's pronounced karg, but I think in Persian or Arabic it's a hark island, because the kh is a h sound. So anyway, but Trump launched an attack on Kark Island, which it's a place where Iran gets its own. It's an oil hub for Iran, so it targeted the strike bombed Iran's Gulf infrastructure. So that was
but notably not the oil. They target the military sites, but not the oil sites, because if they do that, Iran's just going to be like, oh, okay, well, we'll just take out the ones in the Gulf, and this is the point. This is the point of the escalation trap, as it's being called, is that like whatever you do, Iran's going to do it back and worse.
Yeah, and so as this article continues, a day earlier, 2 oil tankers were attacked and left burning off the Iraqi coast, and Iraq and Oman shut off oil terminals. Iran has taken responsibility for several of the strikes on merchant ships in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil output normally flows. And let me repeat that again. This is important. Iran has taken responsibility for several of the strikes on merchant ships in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil output normally flows. Tehran, so Tehran is the capital of Iran, has said that it would not allow oil shipments that benefit the United States and its allies to pass through the strait. Okay, so it's attacking oil shipments that benefit the U.S. and U.S. allies. That's what Iran is doing. So it's bombing. It's basically attacking oil shipments that are for the U.S. and U.S. allies. Oil prices have surged to trade around $100 per barrel, forcing dozens of countries to release emergency reserves to stabilize their economies. Experts say the crisis is the biggest disruption to oil supplies in history. The strikes on shipping have given Iran a strategic success, putting economic pressure on the United States and its allies, even as Iran is under heavy attack. Tehran's actions have also raised questions about whether the United States planned for a lengthy shutdown of the strait. The lever of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must continue to be used, said Mustafa Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, on Thursday. So, again, clearly, I mean, Trump is not famous for planning things through. So obviously, like Trump and P.D. Hegseth, they did not plan for this, like a lengthy shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. Which, again, any of the strategic planners within the U.S. foreign policy blob, they would have, as you've been mentioning, they would have predicted this and planned ahead for it, right? Like if this was like a mainstream, administration who wanted to do regime change in Iran, they would have factored this into their plan to do regime change in Iran. Like if they wanted to commit to like some sort of military strike on Iran, they would have factored in Iran shutting off the Strait of Hormuz. They would have made some sort of contingency plan for that. This is not the case with Trump and the Department of War head, Pete Hegseth. So Trump is in over his head, and I think he's looking for it seems like he's looking for an off-ramp for this. I was listening to Larry Johnson on the Glenn Deason YouTube channel, and one thing he said that I wrote it down because I thought it was so important. He said that there's no way to reopen. Basically, Glenn Deason asked him, is there any way to reopen the Strait of Hormuz immediately, within the next coming days or weeks? He said, Larry Johnson said that there's no way to reopen the Strait of Hormuz without acceptable losses on the U.S. side. And this gets into something very important, because now the U.S. is now sending 5,000 sailors and Marines to the region in response to Iran cutting off the Strait of Hormuz. Now the U.S. is sending basically ground troops, Marines and sailors to the region in response to Iran cutting off the Strait of Hormuz. And keep in mind, the U.S. stockpile of munitions, particularly for these interceptor missiles, they're getting depleted. So are Israel's stockpile of these weapons, these interceptor missiles. So the U.S. and Israel do not have enough munitions to sustain an air war, which means if the U.S. and Israel if they are really dedicated to regime change, which I think they are, by the way, I think both Trump.
Well, they can't back out. Like
they can't back out at this point.
There is no, or as they say, the enemy gets a vote, right?
Right.
So Iran is like, no, we're not stopping you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I think we're at the time of this recording, which is March 15th, 2026. A lot could happen, after we stop recording. But as of now, it remains to be seen like what will happen. But I think Larry Johnson, what he said is really important, that there's no way for the Strait of Hormuz to reopen without acceptable losses on the U.S. side, which I think could entail like Trump just purely chickening out, like, all right, I give up, like, we're going to stop doing this, like, which would be a fucking humiliation that I don't think Trump would want. It would like Trump and Hexa do not want to do that, right? Netanyahu doesn't want to stop this because
Israel's getting pummeled. Like, it's never been hit like this. So they may change their minds, but it like I said, it doesn't matter. He could declare victory and leave, but there's basically nothing to stop the Iranians from continuing to do what they're doing because there's no settlement.
Right, exactly.
Can even be thought of right now.
Yeah, and actually I was listening to on Zeteo News. They had a panel with Rula Jibril, Jeremy Scahill, someone else, and obviously it was hosted by Mehdi Hassan. And Jeremy Scahill's been interviewing a lot of people within the Iranian government. And basically what Scahill is saying is that what Iran wants is basically not just an end to U.S. and Israeli military attacks, but they want an international recognition of Iran's sovereignty and reparations for damage that the war has done in Iran. That's what they want. So Iran wants recognition for their sovereignty and to respect it. Basically just like a guarantee, like, hey, you're not going to fuck with us. And they want reparations for war damage, basically damage by the U.S. and Israel on Iran. They want basically war reparations, damage for the reparations for the damage of war.
I just want to say on the reparations thing, not necessarily think I'm going with this, but when the Vietnam War ended, the U.S. promised the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, about $4 billion in reparations. Then when it came time to pay, they're like, there's a lot of people that are still missing in action, and so until they come home, we're not paying. And that's literally the invention of like the POW MIA flag.
Yeah.
Because they knew those people were dead, but they were just trying to get, America, so much integrity. They're just trying to get out of paying Vietnam. So with the reparations thing, I mean, you can ask for it, and the U.S. might agree to it, but we'll find some way to squirrel out of it.
Yeah, and
just heads up to the Iranian negotiators.
That reminds me of Rambo 2, the movie Rambo 2. That's what that was about, the POWs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was about
completely made up.
Right, yeah. When he said the POW, which is like, by the way, that's showing our age, because like I think when we were, I do remember like when we were kids, at least I remember like people were still talking about that in the 90s, like the POWs, like the MIA flag. I still remember like that being like a thing that because I think that lasted up until like the 80s and like early 90s of like the
Yeah.
POW
I
MIA.
mean, you still see him, but yeah,
Yeah,
it went through into the 90s. They were still arguing about it.
exactly. Yeah, that was still a thing. So if you weren't, for our Gen Z audience, like this is literally before your time. uh, um, so yeah, definitely like a reference there. But yeah. So I doubt that the U.S. and Israel are going to agree to any of that. So that means okay, they're not going to agree to that, which means that this war is still going to go on. And Iran doesn't really need a military victory. They just need to survive this whole thing, which I think they will. I think Iran will survive. And so
Yeah.
if Israel and the U.S. want to keep going on with this war, which at this point they have no choice to, is I really think at this point I'm very confident that there's going to be a ground war. Just at this point, like
Yeah.
everything that's happening right now, especially now that the U.S. has already sent 5,000 sailors and Marines. This is like the U.S. sending advisors in the early stage of the Vietnam War, right? It's just going to escalate, and there's going to be like this sunk cost, right? Because the U.S. is
Yeah.
already going to be investing this effort in fighting this war, and until there's a resolution, there's going to be fighting that still goes on, and Iran just has to survive. And then on the U.S. end, this is probably gonna be like probably one of the worst wars. It definitely in our adult lifetime. It's gonna be because this war, unlike the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, this war is deeply unpopular. No one wants it.
It's already unpopular, yes. So it's not going to get more popular.
It's not going to get more popular. It'll get even less popular. So, and that means like, I mean, I think, look, I am very sure that there's going to be another draft. And so like, there are going to be kids whose classes I'm substituting for at high school. I wouldn't be surprised if they get fucking drafted. And from there, Americans are really going to feel the effect of the war machine, which gets into, okay, I forgot, like the other reason why I think there hasn't been much of an anti-war movement. I think I said it before, but it bears repeating. It was definitely the Obama years that killed the anti-war movement, because Obama was seen as not really the anti-war candidate, but the fact that he opposed the Iraq war from the beginning made him look better than Hillary Clinton. And there was this hope that, and I remember at the time, like having just discussions with people like liberals and progressives who at the time were critical and opposed the Iraq war and were critical of the excesses of the Bush's war on terror, particularly the violations of civil liberties, torture, etc., etc. They felt that by electing Obama, that all that would be reined in, that basically U.S. troops would be withdrawn from Iraq, and the worst effects of the Bush era war on terror, that he would end that. That did not happen. The U.S. Obama did pull troops out of Iraq, but he sent more troops to Afghanistan. So he increased the U.S. war effort in Afghanistan in 2009, by the way. He did not hold any people accountable for lying to the public about the reasons for the Iraq war, relating it to Stanford, Condoleezza Rice, who was Secretary of State during the Bush administration. And before she was Secretary of State, I think people forget this, she was a professor at Stanford, Condoleezza Rice. She was a professor
the
at Stanford.
provost.
Yeah, she was provost. She had deep connections to Stanford before she was in the Bush administration.
Yeah. Just want to say, at the time when I was there, and I think I did not realize exactly how much evil in the world Stanford was responsible for. There was much more of a halo over, that like the tech industry still had good press. People still thought Elon Musk was cool. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You remember the days when people
Mm-hmm.
thought Elon Musk was like kind of cool?
Yep, I remember those days. Yes,
Oh
during
my
the
God.
it was during like the 2010s.
Yeah, yeah. He was like he was kind of a lib. He was making electric car. Point is, it's every time I see fucking David Karp's little fucking like he looking like fucking Wayne Coyne of the Flaming Lips, but the evil version. I swear, I just want to, I like part of the reason, I feel committed to this podcast is just to provide, a different representation of the fact that there are some people that went through that university that figured it out.
Yeah.
Because you really don't understand what is what's taking place in front of you because it feels like you're going to school in Disneyland. But anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, she
um, yeah, go ahead. Then I'd have some thoughts about the ground operation.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so Condoleezza Rice, yeah, she was a professor and a provost at Stanford University, and then after after the Bush administration, after Bush left office, she returned to Stanford, and yours truly, myself, I organized some protests to protest her coming back to Stanford. And I remember at the time, like, there were some mixed feelings. I remember having some arguments with people, even people who opposed the Bush administration. They were like, "Yeah, I don't like the war in Iraq and all that. That was bad, but I think we could learn from Condoleezza Rice." I was like, "What the fuck?" These are Stanford kids, by the way. So like, these are like kind of social climber types. These are those types who like wanted to learn from Condoleezza Rice. They thought like, I think a lot of them
Yeah.
thought that having like, oh, I met with Condoleezza Rice, that would look good on their fucking resume or some shit. Either
Yeah,
these
the low-key sycophancy of a lot of those people is really something to be
yeah,
anyway.
something to be studied. Like, so anyway, so she came back to Stanford. So anyway, there's then we get to the Obama administration, right? Oh, anyway, the reason why I bring it up is because we were trying to call for that she should not be welcomed back at Stanford. She needs to be tried for war crimes because she was part of the administration that lied us into the Iraq War. She peddled lies about the Iraq War. And within her position as Secretary of State, she gave the CIA the green light to torture people. So that was our case against Condoleezza Rice, that she is a war criminal. She's responsible. And at the very minimum, she should not be welcome at Stanford. She should be held accountable for war crimes. So we focus on her because she was coming back to teach at Stanford. So like at the bare minimum, we were like, she shouldn't be here. She should be like tried for war crimes. So there should be accountability for war criminals. But I use that as an example of the fact that there is no accountability for the people who lied the country to go to invade Iraq. There was no accountability for that. Obama, his approach was look forward, not backward. He didn't prosecute any of the bankers who crashed the economy. He didn't prosecute any of the torturers, the war criminals, or the people who lied us into the Iraq War. Instead, he sent more troops to Afghanistan, and he expanded the drone/assassination program. That was his approach to U.S. militarism, was drone strikes and the war in Afghanistan, and no accountability for war criminals, which also meant that he himself committed war crimes. Obama, yes, he did. And then, let's also not forget the U.S. NATO military intervention in Libya, which basically turned Libya into a failed state, and brought back slavery in the U.S. Slavery in Libya, not in slavery in the U.S. still exists in the form of prison labor, so there's that. But like, it brought back the U.S. NATO intervention in Libya brought back slavery to Libya and turned Libya into a failed state. But during that time, I remember a lot of people who were anti-Bush liberals and opposed the Iraq War. They turned a blind eye to Obama's militarism. And I remember having arguments with people about this, that like when people like myself and other lefties who criticize Obama from the left, uh, people just didn't want to hear it. I remember that. People did not want to hear it. They're like, "Oh, you're being a hater, blah 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 blah." There were dumb arguments that like, "Oh, the people who care about drone strikes, they're a bunch of like white dudes who like it's a white bro issue is drone strikes, okay?" And they just don't like Obama. I remember those fucking arguments. I remember that shit. And
Oh man, so
that
unhinged.
that what that did is it depleted the manpower that you would need for an actual anti-war movement in terms of like people who would not just agree with the anti-war stance but actively organize to oppose U.S. wars. So the Obama administration, the Obama effect had a huge role on dampening the anti-war uh, anti-war movement in the U.S., which is why like it is kind of sad to witness. I mean, well, there is deep unpopularity with Trump's the war on Iran, but there isn't much of a movement, really. I mean, there's protests here and there. I don't want to knock that. I don't want to knock the people who are out in the streets. But I'm what I'm saying is that like even though there's like this growing, burgeoning like left energy within like the Democratic Party, the growth of the DSA, the election of Zoran Mamdani as mayor of New York City, yada yada yada, right? Um, within like the left in the U.S., there isn't much of like a organized anti-war flank within the U.S. left. Much of the U.S. left, much of its energy tends to be on domestic issues like the economy, which makes sense, but there needs to be more of a connection between all the money that's spent on the U.S. war machine and the shitty economy in the U.S. And the declining quality of life for the vast majority of Americans. There needs to be more of a connection between that. I think there's some consciousness rising. I don't want to say it's all doom and gloom, but that is something I've been thinking about a lot with the U.S. war in Iran. Is that uh, there isn't as much of an anti-war movement compared to the Iraq War. I mean, there is some semblance
Wow.
of an anti-war movement about with the Iraq
Yeah.
War.
I mean, that is the thing, is, the most protested war in history. What kind of honor is that? I mean, certainly, certainly, there will be time, I think. And to get back to the potential of a ground invasion,
Yeah,
if you look back at the map of Iran and you see how it's basically surrounded by mountains, this is a big part of why it's has a what it can say it has a 6,000 year civilization, because it is Alexander the Great, I believe, is like basically the only Europe it is the only European that's conquered Persia and could not hold it. It is, in defiance of all of world history. So there's that. Um, and yeah, it would require a mobilization that probably, I mean, the thing about reinstituting the draft is like, uh, you know, all of American foreign policy is basically geared around not have like first having a professional military and then relying more on special forces so that you don't have a large ground occupying force. I mean, yeah, even when we talk about ground forces, boots on the ground, what that means, special forces and even the Marines to some degree is that's still all part of the imperial playbook. It's when the army infantry gets called up and is tasked with, pacifying the country. That's when we're really in for something. And all war is political, as Lenin has said. War is politics by other means, and it's an important thing to remember. That war is always political. It always, you know, originates from the politics of the belligerent, um, and then gets played out. So the current state of American politics, like there is part of me that has felt, uh, throughout history, the kinds of situations that lead to revolutions usually involve some sort of very destructive war. You're talking about, I mean, even with the French Revolution, losing the 7 Years' War really put the hurt on the ancient regime, and then even the Paris Commune as after the Franco-Prussian War, obviously, 1917 World War One leading to the Russian Revolution. I mean, the uh, Japanese invasion of China, sort of destroying that old regime, leading to the rise of Mao and the Chinese Communist Party. Um, is it possible, the like there is no, the U.S. American hegemony may be way more fragile than we would like to think. I've, said just to not get my hopes up about anything, the American Empire is definitely in decline, but, something like the Roman Empire, it took a long time to decline before it finally fell. But, things are a little bit, things move a little bit faster these days. And yeah, China has, they may not get involved formally like they did in Korea, but they very much have an interest in not seeing Iran collapse. They rely a lot on Iranian oil, and, they have their own nifty new weapons they want to test out, though Iran, has pretty robust defense industry itself. But the point is that, China can offer a financial support. I mean, even Russia, the whole BRICS project, like this is a bit of a inflection point for it. And, the question of the multipolar order, the question of the end of the unipolar world. I mean, this is all going to get played out right in front of us in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I guess the question is, in terms of the anti-war movement and everything, and, the amount of immiseration that is going to happen to the American people as a result of this war. Is this a point where we do need to start thinking bigger? Um, where will we get to that point? The thing is that like, the I guess I don't want to say lib brain in me, but the part of me that just assumes that, this system, goes on forever because the natural inertia of it assumes that, we won't get to this point um, of a potential revolutionary situation in the United States of America. But the other part is that, which understands that like the American empire in the, Zionist, fascist, technocratic, dystopian future that it is tied to is still made up of human beings and some of the dumbest fucking human beings on the goddamn planet. Um, makes me feel like, this isn't something that is, you know, it could get to that point. Um, and it really depends. I mean, up until this point, there has been, amongst the global south, there's been a sort of cautiousness, like with, Khamenei, he's much more cautious, of like, look, we're not trying to provoke the Americans. We'll just, kind of stay low and build. But, do they see it? Does China see it? Um, does the new Garden Iran see it? Even do they see it as this is the time to force the issue? And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it could get to that point because there is, even if you win, it's even if you succeed at destroying the Islamic Republic of Iran, like you don't really win. This isn't kind of like, there's gonna be a post-war boom. as a result of this. This is entirely out of this is done entirely out of ego.
Yeah.
Uh, so when that, even in victory, like the cost will be so severe that, there's part of me that wonders how, the American political system is pretty rickety. And that, it's not like the Democrats are opposing this. So,
Right.
let's have time to figure it out. But I mean, we probably will have time to figure it out. The Vietnam anti-war movement, though I do also want to say something about that, which is that a big reason for that was the fact that it was this very sort of, unique point in the history of journalism where journalists were given access to the front lines and actually told the truth.
Yep.
And that's been clamped down on a lot now. So, I don't the kinds of cover, and also just that being beamed into network television, which everyone had and couldn't, really turn off, is much harder to avoid. I don't know if we're like, that was a big part in sort of stoking the ire. So I don't know how the media is gonna show up here, because in terms of what's happening day to day, I don't know, and I'm not gonna pretend to know exactly what the situation is, fog of war and everything, but also like everything, the Western media says, I don't trust. I don't really trust Al Jazeera. I mean, I don't trust Press TV either. So, videos uploaded could be AI. So, we are really in a bit of a mind warp, and, this happening at this point, though I suppose this is the only point at which it could have happened. But that said, don't I like we shouldn't be we should be able to understand this juncture in history for what it is, I guess, is what I'll say. And to the degree to which we can, we need to seize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I think we'll close out right around here. I'll give my final wrap up thoughts. Another factor I want to mention about how the Obama years led to the decline of the anti-war movement. I think the methods of his imperialism is a major reason why the anti-war movement declined, is because with drone strikes, right? The American military personnel are not the ones in danger with drone strikes. Other people are still being killed through drone strikes, but American military personnel are not. So I remember that, there are some liberals who were in favor of drone strikes because they're like, well, hey, at least Americans are getting killed. And I was like, well, what about
clean war?
Yeah, like what about the people on the other end? Do they deserve to die? Why kill them? But it's not like they cared about that. And then also with the he kind of let JSOC like do what they wanted. He really ratcheted that approach, and because JSOC, which is Joint Special Operations Command, having U.S. commandos and CIA paramilitary do these direct action raids, and their missions are often classified and secretive. That meant the dirty work of U.S. empire could be done behind closed doors. So, which also meant that people, less people would be paying attention to it. That was Obama's approach, was the use of commandos and drone strikes. So versus, let's say drafting a bunch of Americans to go do the same thing, right? And then I think, my last point, and then I'm getting hungry, so all this talking, we've been talking for 2 hours, but hey, that's why we're here. Yeah, I think, people have been calling this World War III, and I mean, I don't disagree with that. This is, it seems like we're on the precipice of a World War Three of World War Three. This seems like if World War Three were to in fact happen, what's happening right now would be seen as the starting point of it. But I also think that this could trigger some sort of new world order, because even if the U.S. wins, the world order is going to be different. And I do think that the world order that we've been used to, which is the United States being this sole superpower, where its dominance is based on having a shit ton of military bases and it be propped up by the petrodollar, like that world order is in jeopardy. And I think we're in the birthing pains of a new world order that's struggling to be born. That's something I've been thinking about with everything that's going on. I think there's like a new world order that's struggling to be born, and the old world is like still hanging on. As you were talking, Peter, I was kind of scrolling through Twitter, and I'm not on Twitter these days. I'm not active on it, but I look at it from time to time, and the stuff I do look at on Twitter is shit related to climate change, and we are speeding toward past these climate thresholds, and it's very alarming.
And war helps that a lot.
It does. And also the warming of previous years is having the effects get locked in. So basically whatever the carbon emissions from previous years, that stuff accumulates, and so the effects get locked in and we start feeling it like afterward. Because this week there's going to be a heat wave in California, and it's middle of March, which we're barely in spring, and there is a heat wave. I'll show you like the weather report, at least where I live. Let me get it. Like the 10-day forecast is I'm trying to refresh the page. Maybe I can look at it on my phone. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's the 10-day forecast. So tomorrow, today's Sunday, so tomorrow, Monday, it's going to be 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and the hottest it will be is on Friday, 89 degrees, which here in the Bay Area, that's summer weather, basically. That's more like the weather you expect by like around late May, but we're in the middle of March right now. And then after this week, next week, temperatures will decline and it'll go back to the 70s, that's pretty normal for March, is like 70s, like mid 70s, maybe upper 70s. That's normal for March. It starts getting around 80, like usually around like April, like late April, around there is when you start getting into the 80s. But right now there's a heat wave, and it's going to be in the upper 80s next week. And we're in the middle of March, which is pretty fucking weird. And there's other parts of California, like the desert, like Palm Desert around there. It's going to be triple digit weather. So like this is another effect of war, of particularly the U.S. war machine. Wars in general, but especially the U.S. wars, which because of the size of the U.S. war machine. This is the effect of it. All the carbon emissions from war and the missiles that get launched, and even the gas that's needed for all this military equipment, that tanks, jets, drones, military vehicles, everything. That's all. Like, you need oil for that shit. So the price of oil plays a role in like the U.S. war machine keeps it going. So this is the effect of it. I think it's hard. I think sometimes it may be hard for people to see like how these things are connected immediately. But when you kind of zoom out and look at the big picture from a long term and look at it in a long term perspective, it starts to make sense. Um, but yeah, that is something I worry about is the effect of climate change. But I do think that what I try to remain hopeful about is that uh, we can use this opportunity to help birth a new world order. Um, a, and I think we're kind of like in some weird point where like a better world is struggling to be born, but the old current world, it just keeps hanging on for dear fucking life, even though like it needs to die. Like this world order we're living in, it just needs to go. It needs to die. It needs to die off for the long-term survival of humanity and planet Earth. It needs to die off. But for some it just keeps hanging on to dear fucking life, but it just won't fucking die. Um and I think just if you care about humanity, you would care about the US empire just letting it die. And I how it dies off, I mean, we'll see. It could be this war with Iran. This could be the thing that really just becomes like the nail in the coffin for this current world we're living in. This, or maybe not final nail in the coffin, but like definitely we're on the precipice of it. Like it has already shattered confidence in the ability of other countries to trust US leadership. I think that is for sure. Like let's say the US wins this militarily, like the whatever reputation the U.S. had for like being the leader of the free world, like it's wrecked. Although I will say it is fucking weird. Like, uh, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, he had that speech where he was at it was Davos, I believe, where he said that the rules-based international order benefited the West at the expense of the global South, and we went along with it because we benefited from it, and like, da 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 da. But now seeing all these other Western leaders in Europe, with the exception of Spain, they're going along with this war in Iran for some fucking reason. After they were worried about Trump invading Greenland, now they're like, "Oh yeah, go ahead and bomb Iran. We'll support you." They're struggling. They those leaders still want to hang on to that old world this world order, but the majority of Europeans and the majority of Americans don't want this. So it really is up to us to organize and plant the seeds and build from the ground up, like a basically a new world that we can all live in and survive in. And obviously, with the spirit of this podcast, we believe Pan-African socialism is part of that, especially if you're concerned with the long-term survival of people of African descent. I would argue Pan-Africanism is necessary for that, but then we also have to adjust Pan-African socialism for, current material conditions, which, hey, that's part of, the great tradition of dialectical materialism. Anyway, that's what I have. Those are my final thoughts for all this shit.
Um, all right, and it's gonna be story time. I'll try and make it brief, but
Mm.
I've been waiting for this for a long time.
Oh
This is
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
okay. So, in about 53 BC, this is basically during the late this is the end of the Roman Republic, basically. This is Caesar's. He's out in Gaul, France, doing his thing. Um, but he's part of a triumvirate, which they're teaming forces. It's him, Pompey Magnus. He's sort of like the general war hero. Um, and then you have Marcus Licinius Crassus, who's the richest man in Rome. Uh, he basically everyone owes him money, but no matter how wealthy he is, The one thing he doesn't have is any real military victory. Before this, the best thing he had done was put down the Spartacus uprising, which
Yeah.
among Romans, they don't really respect that that's an internal thing. He needs glory on the battlefield. And who's the biggest, baddest, uh people around that just need to feel the fury of Rome? The Parthian Empire. And the Parthian Empire is basically located in Iran. It is the Persian Empire, but of a different name. And so, I believe when he ends up becoming consul, um, elected, he they work some things out. They do some funny things with what the actual rules are about who can do what. The norms and the institutions of the Roman Republic have been pretty frayed out now, and they think that Parthia is weak. I'm looking at Wikipedia right now, because there is a war of succession, and so Marcus Crassus, who at this point in life, he's 62, he's no spring chicken. He decides to set out. Uh, in he launches in I think 56 BC, 55 BC, with about 7 legions, about 35,000 infantry, and some cavalry. One of the interesting things about Rome is they actually didn't have really strong cavalry. They would borrow it from other people. But anyway, they wander off. They're going through Turkey, and they ask like the locals, how do we get to this place? And they're like, oh, go this way, and not really thinking about whether or not they're being headed in the right direction. But they end up at Carrhae. So this is the Battle of Carrhae, Carrhae. And I'll try to be brief with this. Okay, after being informed of the presence of the Parthian army, numbered roughly 10,000, Crassus's army panicked. Crassus's commanding general Cassius recommended that the army to be deployed in the traditional Roman fashion, with infantry forming the center and cavalry on the wings. At first, Crassus agreed, but he soon changed his mind and redeployed his men to a hollow square, each side formed by 12 cohorts. This formation would protect his forces from being outflanked, but at the cost of mobility. So it's like basically everyone forms a square facing outward so that someone can't come up behind you, but it's much harder to retreat. Um, the Parthians went to great lengths to intimidate the Romans. Firstly, they beat a great number of hollow drums, and the Roman troops are unsettled by the loud cacophonous noise. Then the Parthian general ordered his cataphracts to cover their armor in cloths and advance. When they are in sight of the Romans, they simultaneously drop the cloths to reveal their shining armor. Um, those, okay, so basically, um, the Parthians are great in archery. They're master archers, and so they sent Serena, the Parthian general. He sent his horse archers to surround the Roman square, remaining beyond the range of the Roman javelins. Crassus then thus sent his skirmishers to drive the horse archers off, but they were driven back by the latter's arrows. The horse archers then engaged the legionaries. The legionaries were protected by their large shields, but they could not cover the entire body. Some historians describe the arrows partially penetrating the Roman shields and nailing the shields, the limbs of the Roman infantry, and nailing their feet to the ground. Um, the Romans repeatedly advanced towards the Parthians to attempt to engage in close quarters fighting, but the horse archers were always able to retreat safely and lose Parthian shots as they withdrew. That means that the Parthians are so good at this shit. They basically, while they're riding away, they can turn around and fire an arrow at the formation. Um, Legionaries then formed the testudo formation by locking their shields together to present nearly impenetrable front to missiles. However, that formation severely restricted their ability in melee combat. Uh, the Parthian cataphracts exploited that weakness and repeatedly charged the Roman line, which caused panic and inflicted heavy casualties. Um, Crassus now hoped that his legionaries could hold out until the Parthians ran out of arrows. However, Serena used thousands of camels to resupply his horse archers. Um, you're starting to see some parallels here. Upon this realization, Crassus dispatched his son Publius with 1,300 Gallic cavalry, 500 archers, and 8 cohorts of legionaries to drive off the horse archers. Horse archers feigned retreat and drew off Publius's forces, which suffered heavy casualties from arrow fire. Once Publius and his men were sufficiently retreated from the rest of okay, basically they cut off the cavalry, destroy them. Crassus's son uh gets killed, and he sees it in front of him. And this, you know, he organized he ordered a disorganized, ragged retreat to the nearby town of Cray, leaving behind 4,000 wounded who were killed by the Parthians the next morning. Only out of 35,000 Roman legionaries against a force of 10,000, only 20 survived.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. The next day, Serena sent a message to the Romans to an offer to negotiate. Serena proposed a truce to allow the Roman army to return to Syria in exchange for Rome giving up all of its territory east of the Euphrates. Serena either sent emissary. Okay. Crassus was reluctant to meet with the Parthians, but his troops threatened to mutiny otherwise. At the meeting, a Parthian pulled at Crassus's reins, which sparked violence, at which Crassus and his generals were killed. After his death, and this is a very legendary thing, the Parthians allegedly poured molten gold down his throat in a symbolic gesture mocking Crassus's notorious greed.
Oh, shit.
Plutarch reports that Crassus's severed head was then used as a prop for a part of a play, Euripides' Bacchae, performed at a banquet before the king. The remaining Romans attempted to flee, but most were captured or killed. This is one of the biggest defeats in the history of the Roman Empire. Now, it didn't destroy the Roman Empire, but
right.
This is what happens when you try to invade Persia.
Yeah.
As a Westerner. Okay?
Yeah.
And I know Petey's in love with ancient Rome. I'm sure he's heard this story. I don't know if he remembers this story. He might do well too, but I guarantee you every single Iranian general knows this story. I guarantee you.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Because
just something to meditate on what the U.S. has found itself into, and that's all I gotta say.
Yeah, and you mentioned Spartacus. That reminds me of one of my favorite TV shows, the show Spartacus, which is about the Spartacus Rebellion, and Crassus. Yeah, he's one of the main villains, particularly in the season 4, because the original Spartacus series was four seasons, and then they did a reboot of it, but it was like a new universe. So basically, one of the slaves, Asher, a Syrian, he betrayed the Spartacus Rebellion, and he gets killed in one of the earlier seasons. I think season 3. Yeah, season 3. Because the first actor in season 1 who played Spartacus, he passed away sadly of cancer. Then the second season was like the story of what led to the Badiatus was the guy who owned the Ludus, which trained Spartacus. So the second season was about like the story of Badiatus getting the Ludus and all that stuff. Then the third season they resume with the actor who played for the rest of the series, so Liam McIntyre. Anyway, Asher was a Syrian slave, but he was like a house slave. Like he was the one who was trying to he wanted to make a name for himself, and he wasn't really respected by the other gladiators in the Ludus, and so he was against. So he had a grudge against them, and so he would collaborate with the Romans to suppress Spartacus. Anyway, he gets killed in the third season. It's spoilers, but anyway. But in House of Asher, they reboot it so he gets resurrected in like an alternate universe. So he winds up owning the Ludus where Spartacus was at. So that's the show I've been watching. I bring it up because in House of Asher, he takes a woman who's Nubian and trains her to become, basically purchases her because she's a slave, and he trains her to become like a gladiator because he's like, because gladiators are like these celebrities, and he was like, wait, it would be killer to have like a woman in the ring and have her fight because she's like this fearsome warrior. But I bring it up because, speaking of Roman history, the Romans did try to conquer Nubia, because the Romans, they conquered Egypt was part of the Roman Empire, so they did try to go south. And let me Google the battle, but yeah, the Romans did. They tried to they did it was one of the forgotten wars. It was the Roman-Nubian War from 25 BC to 21 BC. It was between the Roman Empire and the Kingdom of Kush. That was the Kingdom of Nubia at the time. It was Kingdom of Kush. So apparently it was triggered by Roman taxation of Lower Nubia after.
Yeah, Romans were pretty terrible tax thieves. Anyway,
so,
I just had to get that in there.
No, totally. I'm glad you did. Yeah. And it was led by Queen Aminirenas. Queen Aminirenas. Yeah, it was actually led by a Nubian queen. She fought Rome's army. And yeah, she pushed back a Roman invasion. She had a command of 30,000 soldiers in the ancient Kingdom of Kush, so located in modern-day Sudan. And they fought back Roman invaders who had advanced from Egypt. So, anyway, yeah, so Africa, the African continent in general, throughout, there's a long tradition of female heads of state, female rulers, by the way. So, when people say like, kind of talk about patriarchy and like men in positions of leadership as like some sort of like natural order of things, I always think of, well, look at African history, because like there's a lot of examples of very strong like women who are rulers and heads of state and who've commanded militaries and stuff like that, who fought back invaders. Like there's a lot of examples in African history. So like Queen Nzinga, for example, and then Queen Amanirenas. I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but yeah. So Rome did try to conquer Nubia, but lost. And I believe so as a result of losing the battle against the Kingdom of Kush, Rome negotiated rather than conquered the region. So yeah, on this podcast, we're fans of history, ancient history, and stuff like that. And this is a good place if you want to get like even takes on ancient history that challenge Eurocentric understandings of history. But yeah, I mean, there's a long history of like, look, Europeans trying to conquer Persia, and like it doesn't go well.
It doesn't go well.
It doesn't go very well. So like, people who like are shocked that like, wait, Iran's like fighting back, like they're not giving up. I'm like, yeah, they have a 2,000 plus year history of doing that. So I don't know. Like you probably shouldn't fuck with them, man. Like they have a long, like the Persian civilization. It is older. It's older than Christianity, because it's like, I think like 2,500 year history of Persia, I believe.
Oh,
right?
I mean, it might be older than Judaism, honestly.
Yeah. It is. It's older than the Abraham. I mean, it's definitely older than Islam and Abrahamic religions. It's older. Look, Persian civilization is older than most like European countries. If we're gonna be honest, like a lot of like the
Oh,
Europe,
oh, by far.
yeah, like I mean, if we're gonna say anything, the oldest like European continuous civilization is really Greece. Like, they're probably the oldest in Europe, but like you know, and there's been conflicts between Greeks and Persians as well. Um,
Yeah.
so like um, there's that movie. Remember when it came out? The movie 300, like Sparta and
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's not
there
talk about that.
there are some anti
Iran really didn't like that movie.
I mean, for good reason. Looking
Yeah.
back,
I,
but
I,
that's an example of like how Iran was portrayed in the 2000s.
yes. Yeah. No, that was big. And we need to wrap this up because I'm trying to catch the end of the USA versus Dominican Republic. But yeah, I would always play as the Persians in Civilization 3, and I always had a great respect for that civilization.
Yeah,
And you know, yeah, a place, a group, a people with an actual sense of history who understand who they are not, that's something America doesn't quite get. So
no, because American uh actually this can probably like we're not going to talk about Pan Africanism right now, but like this will be like a good sort of like maybe teaser for our future discussion for about that. But um like because you and I we both like ancient history, and I on this podcast I want to do more episodes on African history, ancient African history, particularly like I am very very fascinated with pre-slavery African history, especially as someone like myself who's Black American, but I play the djembe, a West African drum, and I always tell people this djembe is the instrument itself does go back to the days of the Mali Empire. So like the djembe is a drum. You'll see knockoff djembes like at stores. I call them knockoffs because I have three djembes and they're all imports from West Africa. So the quality of those drums is like a lot better than like the kind of I would say like knockoffs. When I to specify by knockoffs, these are usually djembes not made in Africa. These are like imitations of djembes, and like they get used in like kind of world ethnic percussion, but it's like it's not a real djembe. Anyway, but the djembe as a drum goes it was developed in 1200 AD during the time of the Mali Empire. Um so for that so I play that drum a lot as a percussionist. And by the way, on my solo episodes, the intro drumming percussion is played by myself on djembe. So that's what you're hearing. Like if you listen to my solo episodes, like particularly starting with the one on D'Angelo and moving forward, the intro is me playing djembe. So my solo music, what I play is a mix of West African folk music and music of the African diaspora. So that's the stuff I play. So I've kind of like sort of like been forging my own style anyway, my own like kind of unique blend of African styles of rhythm and percussion. But anyway, I say that because like if you look at America as a country, it's pretty new. But if you look at African American heritage, it is nowhere near as old as Persia. But you know, if you're going to start African American history at 1619, when the first Africans came here as slaves, our culture is pretty old. At this point now, like 400 years is, nothing to quite sneeze at. And also, I would say like African American culture as an identity, this is why I bring it up, it's older than the U.S., technically. Definitely predates the American Revolution. So, but yeah, America doesn't really appreciate cultures that have thousands of years of continuous history, uh, particularly like Persia, India, China, um, Japan a little bit, but like Japan's more like, I mean, modern Japan, I guess, like you could start it with the 1200s, I guess, in terms of our lot of like Japanese history, but uh, continuity and stuff like that probably. I guess like the conception of modern Japan, I guess you could start with like maybe the 1200s, but like I mean, obviously there's much longer history with Japan before that, um, but starting with like Japan fighting off the Mongols and then the rise of the samurai. So that's what I mean. But yeah, America does not really appreciate cultures that have like long histories and how that shapes their worldview. Um, and that is definitely playing out with the U.S. war with Iran. So yeah, I'm banking. Iran doesn't need to win militarily. It just needs to survive and weaken the U.S. like dampen confidence in the U.S. empire, which I think is doing successfully, and we're gonna have to be prepared for that. Anyway, do you have anything else to say, Peter? Otherwise, we can.
No, that's it.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, that is it for this episode. Another long one, and yeah, a lot. I mean, something like this topic definitely entails fleshing out a long time. But yeah, if you like this episode and you want access to more bonus content and again stuff to look forward to, um, uh, I I definitely want I definitely plan on recording some episodes on this book, Africa and the Blues by Gerhard Kubik. So basically, to kind of summarize, he's a ethnomusicologist. The book came out in 1999, by the way, but he traced the origins of African American blues music to the Sahel region of West Africa, and somewhere to like 25% to 30% of enslaved Africans brought to the U.S. came from the like Senegambia, like Sahelian region. So, blues music, the African American, really the oldest African American form of folk music, the origin of that goes back to West Africa, particularly that part of Africa. And he talks about like particularly the sound of the blues, like the blue notes and the flat fifth and even like flat third and seventh. So the the notes and the scales that what makes the blues sound like the blues. He traces it back to West Africa, and it's a really good book. I've been trying to recommend it for people to read, especially if they want to, particularly if you want to understand understand more the African origins of elements of African American culture. I would definitely say like that's a book worth reading. But it has a lot of like music theory stuff, so I thought it'd be worthwhile to just like explain the book, kind of summarize it in different bonus episodes, and might even like release one of it for free. But anyway, I say that because that's something to look forward to for bonus content. So if you're interested in stuff like that, $5 a month, you could become a patron at patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. If you are listening to this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon for notifications so you know when new episodes pop up. $3 a month, you can become just a supporter of the podcast. But you won't have access to bonus content. But yeah, that's to kind of give you an idea of what to expect for future bonus content material, and also like digging into Pan-Africanism and stuff like that. Oh yeah, realsankarahours.org. That's our website where you can find basically like a one-stop shop for where you can find us. So yeah. Anyway, let's sign out. Keep the faith.
Stay dangerous.
All right, peace out.
Bye.